Hello everybody, have you ever wondered whether it is possible to do some 3D coin engraving using only a 20-watt fiber laser engraver? Well, in this video, hopefully in just a few minutes, I'll try to show you how you can do so. Let's get started. First important thing to notice is that, apologize for the terrible quality this video may have. I really just want to get this through as quickly as possible, so I won't be doing any fancy editing or anything like that. Also, I will not be going into how to use Lightburn or create 3D maps, as there are already plenty of videos out there showing how to do this how to do just that. Instead, I want to focus on the main settings and some theory in order to help you actually achieve like a proper 3D coin engraving with such a weak laser such as this one. That doesn't mean it's bad, however. And I'll show you just why. So, first thing is focus. Obviously, you want to make sure that your laser is focused, but you want to move it slightly further down from its most optimal focal point. Why, you may ask? Well, I have this insanely accurate diagram here. As you can see, this is more or less a representation of the beam. Here's the lens and here would be the coin, and as you can see, somewhere in between that beam there is a focal range, basically where the beam actually has the most power and will do some engraving. Usually, of course, you want to make sure that the distance between your object and your lens is right, the exact distance, so that it's within its optimal window and at its most optimal point. However, if we do that, as you can see, we only really have this much distance. Why does this not draw? It drew a few seconds ago. There we go. We only have this much distance to engrave, which means that as we start engraving and the laser goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the coin, we're actually going to end up going outside this window, and that is going to cause us a lot of issues. More precisely, going into this other amazing diagram that I drew here. As you can more or less see, this is basically the amount of layers. So we will start at 0 and then just going through more and more layers as it continues to engrave. While it's within this window, the laser is basically going to be engraving at optimal efficiency. Now, technically the graph isn't exactly like this, but just bear with me. However, as we go deeper into the coin and the distance between the object and the lens increases as we're going further down, we're actually going to go away from this optimal window and we're going to start losing efficiency, which means that the laser is going to struggle more and more to engrave into the coin. Now, why did I say before that we want to move the head down? Because by moving the head further down, while still being inside this window, of course, we don't want to move it too much, because then we're actually going to end up being somewhere around here and it's not going to engrave at all. But as long as the laser is still somewhat focused, if we move it down, we no longer just have this much area to work with, but we will be moving it slightly up. So now we will start somewhere around here and we gain all of this extra area to engrave, resulting in a much deeper engraving. There are a few other ways to mitigate this. I know some of the most advanced lasers have some sort of automatic set leveling, so after a few passes it will go down to compensate. I also try to, for example, do a certain amount of passes, a few hundred, and then manually moving the laser down to ensure that we're always within this window. Because the moment that we go outside this window, that's when we're going to start losing power, and it's all just going to be a big mess. Alright, second thing that we will need to do is actually run some tests ourselves. Now you can see this amazing coin that I have here, and you may be wondering, what the hell is this? Well, it's simple. I made a very simple cube engraving into this coin, with each square representing a number of passes. I don't exactly remember how much each one was now, as this was a bit old. But what I would want you to do is the following. Get the coin or whatever material you're going to be engraving, and you want to engrave a square just like this one Also make sure it's in the center. So don't create a pattern and have the laser engrave it that way, because then we're gonna be running into some traversals. You always want to make sure it engraves in the center, and then you just move the coin and repeat the process. Do so every 100 passes or 50, it doesn't matter. What I want you to know is how deep every, for example, 100 passes the laser engraves. And what you will realize is you will find something like this. The first few 100 passes, more or less, you will be engraving, you will be taking out the same amount of material. So let's say a 10th of a millimeter, 20th of a millimeter, 30, and so on. However, as we reach the end of this optimal window, as it goes further down, you'll see you actually start to get less and less depth every the same amount of 100 passes, for example. And that's how we know that we are actually going away from this focal range. After you've done that, I then want you to decide a certain amount of layers that you want to go for your 3D engravings. So you don't want to go too high, because then you're going to be spending a lot of time and you're barely going to be gaining any depth at all. But I also don't want you to go too short, because then you're still going to be losing a lot of depth. For my one, 500 passes, so 500 layers, is the most optimal in terms of my time and efficiency. After 100 passes, every extra 100, I was barely getting a few millimeters, since I was already running way outside the optimal window. So 500 is pretty much the sweet spot for this one. It may vary for you, and especially depending on what settings we're going to be using in Lightburn, which is the third thing that I'm going to be getting just now. And here we have Lightburn, as well as my really ugly reflection on the screen. So, settings for this laser. This will obviously vary depending on the laser you have. This is a Com Marker B4 20 watt non-MOPA fiber laser. And honestly, it's a really capable laser despite its relatively weak power. The settings that I used, well, a speed of 1000 millimeters per second. Remember, it is millimeters per second, not like inches or per minute or anything like that. I know some softwares or lasers do measure this differently. Obviously, we're going to be running at full power. I mean, this is already quite a weak laser. We wouldn't want this to be running any less than that. And the frequency is also really important. This one, I believe, ranges from 30 to 60. As it not being a MOPA fiber laser, it's quite limited in that regards, but as you probably already know, the lower the frequency, the more oomph each pulse is going to have, and so the more you're going to engrave. With some of the more powerful lasers, you can get away with using higher frequencies, but here, well, we're already kind of low on that department, so certainly not. Line interval of 0.05 millimeters, 500 dpi. I found that to be just alright, I guess. And like I said, 512 passes. 512 doesn't really matter, just to keep up with the ratio. And of course, you want to have a cleanup pass, which Lightburn allows you to do. I've got it set every 8 passes, slightly higher speed, slightly higher frequency, and lower power, so that it's only really just cleaning and not, edging away. And that is it. Honestly, I mean, the results kind of speak for themselves. This was only at about 400 passes, I believe. Can't exactly remember. The deepest spot is about a 1/7 of a millimeter, so close to a millimeter, but not quite. But it could certainly go beyond 1 millimeter with a few more passes. But like I said, we're already reaching that point of like little return, so it would just take a lot longer for very little gains. And this took around 2.5 hours with a 20 watt laser engraver. Of course, with a more powerful one, you'll be able to do the same at a lot less time. But at least it shows that even such like the most weakest machines in this category can still achieve some really good results. You just gotta know the theory behind it, and of course make sure you've got everything properly set up. And if you do, I am pretty certain that you will be able to achieve these results. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot the lens, really important. I am running some 110, as you can see, by 110 lenses. The two that came with this laser, it was either 110 or 200 by 200, so much larger workspace. However, these lenses are the best when it comes to deeper engraving. The other lens, they may be better for larger, work areas, but they really struggle at actually, having enough power to edge away the material. However, a really curious fact that the other lenses have is that their focal range is usually bigger, which means that you're going to be able to engrave deeper on those other lenses without having to worry so much about going out of focal range so quickly. However, again, it's that reduction in like raw engraving power is really noticeable, especially with a weak laser like this one. So if this took around 2.5 hours with these lenses, with the other lens to engrave the exact amount, we're probably looking at 4 hours. So yeah, technically you could go deeper with the other lens and not have to worry so much about this at the cost of pretty much doubling the amount of time that you're going to use just to achieve the same result, let alone try to go even deeper than that. So yeah, that was pretty much it. Again, sorry for the terrible quality, and this is really a bit of an iffy explanation, but I hope it got the point across. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. This was basically what I was able to, to test, and yeah, it's certainly not comparable to some of the most powerful advanced machines, but hey, for such a relatively weak and cheap machine, it's still amazing what you can do. So yeah, anyways, I hope you like this video, and thank you for watching.